Hey there folks, the number one Mariah Carey fan from the Infinite Jukebox here with another entry in my Rock Hall Reviews series for 2025. What is the Rock Hall Review series, you may be asking? It's a yearly series that I do on this channel where I talk about each of the current year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees, review one record by each of them, and then talk about if I think they deserve to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and if I think they will get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Two questions that more frequently than you would ever expect have very different answers. And today I'm talking about one of the most beloved, iconic, commercially successful pop artists, general artists of all time, Mariah Carey. More specifically, her somewhat comeback album, The Emancipation of Mimi. Listen, I will be real. I have never been the biggest Mariah Carey fan, and by that I mean to say I just straight up don't like her. I've found most of her music to be kind of lacking in every way that I can possibly conceive. I mean, she never had as much personality or charisma as some of her peers. A lot of her work just bores me sonically. However, I can't deny it when I end up at least even slightly enjoying an album by an artist that I otherwise feel, to say the most positive thing I can about most of Carey's discography, extreme disinterest and extreme neutrality towards. And The Emancipation of Mimi is absolutely a well-produced, well-performed record, as well as, in my eyes, probably the best album that Mariah has ever put out, and to date, in my opinion, remains her sort of creative magnum opus, or at the very least, just the best performance that she's put out vocally and in terms of production. So first and foremost, to just get the positives out of the way, let me talk about everything that I really do genuinely enjoy about this record. First and foremost, the production is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, songs like We Belong Together perfectly fuse that sort of adult contemporary instrumental that she had always had really worked with throughout the majority of her career up to this point, with the sort of snap-clap hip-hop soul vibes that were not only popular in Carey's sound by this point, but just in general within mainstream R&B in the United States at this point in music history. And although nothing found here is really super unique or anything that you couldn't find on a lot of other similar mainstream pop soul kind of records like this in the mid to early 2000s, I think that this is just a really pleasing record sonically, and tracks are composed really nicely, they flow together perfectly, and appearances from people, mainly rappers like Snoop Dogg, Nelly, Twista, and even the late Fat Man Scoop, while very much of their era of mainstream rap and very much dated in terms of modern standards, are still fun through and through, and I can't really hate on their appearances at all, as they do act as a nice way to break up the record and give the listener a chance to step away from Mariah's undeniable vocal talent to appreciate some other corners of the popular music scene of the mainstream at the time, as they are featured here on The Emancipation of Mimi, and featured in pretty decent, solid places at that. That's about the most positive slew of things I can say about this record, which I honestly just consider to be decent. Now, of course, this record is also extremely impressive vocally. I don't think I really need to explain that Mariah Carey is an extraordinarily talented vocalist and performer from a technical perspective. I mean, she rightfully is considered one of the most all-time powerful vocalists throughout the history of popular music, but I still can't help like the technical and compositional abilities being put on display here in terms of her vocal technique are just trying to make up for a lack of personality from Mariah. I mean, genuinely, anytime that I listen to any R&B, pop R&B kind of record from this era, from someone like Brandy or Aaliyah, I basically immediately know that it's them and can discern their unique personalities and styles behind the mic, their own charismas that they brought to the table that made them the superstars that they deserved to be and to become, whereas I just feel like Mariah is an extraordinarily talented vocalist that is still extraordinarily boring. I mean, sure, she can sing better than 99.9% of the rest of the world, and I'm really in no place to comment on someone's vocal abilities in a technical sense anyway, considering if you put a gun to my head and told me to sing any song in the right key, I would be a goner, but at the same time, technical ability, no matter how admirable it is, can never make up for being boring, and that's exactly what I feel Mariah is as a performer, and that's arguably the worst crime that you can commit. There are more records that are outright bad or poorly performed that I enjoy in one way or another than there are records that I find boring that I enjoy, because no album can be boring and entertaining at the same time, obviously. And despite the fact that I think that this is a solid effort overall, Mariah is still the weakest link on this record, and it really is the strong production and generally interesting place that it has in the history of popular music that saves it from feeling like a lot of her other records. Decently produced mainstream pop and R&B that has a talented vocalist who really has nothing to say or do. To expand upon what I mean when I say that I find this record's place in the history of popular music to be interesting, I mean that because the main reason I find this record so fascinating in the context of Mariah's larger body of work is because beyond some really excellent production, it feels like it has a little bit more attitude than really anything else that she had put out before this, and that's mainly because she actually had some. I mean, when this came out, at this point in her career, the film Glitter was only a couple years old after having flopped majorly in being one of the most critically reviled films to reach the mainstream throughout the early 2000s, and it seemed like, generally speaking, her reign as pop's biggest star had pretty much begun to come to an end, if not just come to a screeching halt totally, and then bam, this record drops and just oozes confidence and sort of acts as a bit of a middle finger to anyone that didn't believe in her ability to drop another smash hit like this, and in that sense, I find it an interesting album. It's not a record that I love or anything, but I think it is really interesting because it does have that going for it, an album that I can genuinely admire, whereas a lot of her other records just feel like pretty milquetoast music that doesn't really have anything unique or creative to say in any particular way. This album at least does feel like someone who had some sort of drive to take her crown back, so to speak, to get back on the throne as the biggest pop star in the entirety of the United States, and arguably even the world at this point in her career, because for a good couple of years there, it seemed like she no longer held that title, and she pretty quickly took it back with this one, or at the very least was among the upper echelons of her particular type of musician again. Either way, whether you consider her to be the greatest pop star of all time, or you're like me, and you aren't particularly a fan of her larger body of work, there's no denying that this album is pretty much filled with a desire to be back where she was, and whether that came from a desire for actual critical success again, some commercial success again, or a more earnest desire to just reconnect with her roots as an artist and to once again make music that people truly genuinely loved on a larger scale, that's up for debate. But either way, you can just feel that in this record, and it makes for an album that, despite generally sounding good and mainly being appealing to me on a sonic level, is also interesting and, like I said before, genuinely admirable from a creative and artistic standpoint. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. Now, does Mariah Carey deserve to get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Yes, absolutely. I don't think I really need to explain why. One of the biggest and most influential pop stars of all time. I mean, obviously, someone as famous and as iconic as her is always going to be a bit of a polarizing figure at the end of the day. I don't think that really comes as a shock to anybody, but to say that she doesn't deserve it would just be foolish, and even my heavy disdain for a lot of her work and general mediocrity that I kind of find in even some of her better albums, that can't blind me from seeing that she really is one of the most impactful pop musicians of the entire 20th century, which is saying a lot, because not only is the massive commercial success there, but there are so many balladeers in the modern day that would not be capable of bringing pop R&B to the mainstream without the impact that Mariah had in the first place, thus making her massively influential as well. And honestly, it's a baffling thing that she did not get in on the first nomination, but here we are, second nomination, and she absolutely deserves to get in this time. If I were making a ballot based on my personal favorites here, there was a snowball's chance in hell that she would be picked, but if we were making a ballot based on who I earnestly, without any sort of bias, thought deserved to be inducted based off of influence and cultural impact, Mariah would be one of the first 3 picked here, for me, if I'm being completely honest, and that pains me to say when she's maybe one of my least favorite artists on the list this year, which is saying a lot because there's a couple here that I really do not like, but nonetheless, absolutely deserves it, goes without saying. Now, will Mariah get in? And honestly, that's kind of a bit of a harder question than I would have expected a couple years back. The first time that she was nominated, I honestly thought she was an immediate lock, maybe more so than anybody else on her first ballot, just because the Hall loves people like Mariah. Massively commercially successful artists that would 100% without question draw a crowd, especially as they've gone in a bit of a more pop-domistic direction, inducted a lot of artists that previously would have been seen as too pop, quote-unquote, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It seemed like the second that Mariah was nominated, she was destined to be inducted just based on notoriety alone. Screw influence, commercial success alone 100% would have gotten her in, and I wouldn't have complained in all honesty. But that didn't happen. She got passed over, which is a pretty shocking thing to witness, honestly, for one of the biggest pop stars of all time. Though, maybe not the most shocking thing in the world, considering there have been some artists similar to Mariah's caliber as most influential pop stars of all time that have, generally speaking, gotten passed over a little bit. Specifically, artists like Janet Jackson and Donna Summer, which not only shows that the Hall has a degree of bias against pop stars still, despite the fact that many do absolutely deserve it, but it shows that the Hall also has some legitimate bias against women still, specifically women of color, who historically have not really fared super well with the Hall. I mean, certain artists like, again, Janet Jackson, Donna Summer, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey now, have struggled to be inducted despite being some of the most popular and influential artists of their respective generations of pop music, yet at the same time, a lot of less notable classic rock bands have gotten in first ballot, first try, first time being nominated. Bands like Foreigner and most likely this year Bad Company are prime examples of that. And no matter what you want to boil that issue down to, if it's a problem that the Hall has with inducting women of color, women in general, just pop stars, a bit of all three, which is probably where I would lean on that category in general, just a bit of everything, it's still a problem that the Hall has in one way or another, and it's one that they seemingly won't be fixing in the near future. And maybe, just maybe, if Mariah does get in this year, that will kick things off and allow for some artists of a similar or even slightly lesser caliber, but nonetheless impactful status to be inducted in the near future despite being pop stars. Or maybe she won't get inducted again, and it'll be a big controversy again because her lawyer got inducted before she actually did. Either way, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, but as it stands, I honestly think that she probably has a good chance this year, and the Hall would be missing one of their biggest opportunities to draw attention to the upcoming induction ceremony by not inducting her. I think people would be extremely passionate about her induction, whether she even shows up for it or not, and at the end of the day, it would just be a foolish mistake to not induct her, though that really isn't up to the Hall as it is so much the voters. But still, will be interesting to see what happens. I think that she will be inducted, though, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And with that being said, that is the end of this entry in the Rock Hall Review series. Thank you for watching the Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.